Very few people come on the show and say there's 100x innovation in their product. If companies like Dextall become the norm, then more people get access to housing.
I'm not an engineer. I'm not an architect. Somehow magically I got into construction, and it's like a mafia. Like, it sucks you in and it never allows you to leave.
First Lithuanian founder on the show, by the way, so shout out to that.
When you run a business, you live and breathe the business, and you really understand what are the issues, what are the nuances, and you sort of naturally start seeing the opportunities of where the industry is heading.
You start a business for one reason, and then you find a totally other business inside of it, becoming an expert.
Dextall is the only company in the world, actually, that can do this. Go from design all the way to fabrication drawings in an instance. Like, that does not exist in our industry.
The architect is the artist, and then the builders are the people that are actually on earth with what's realistic.
Welcome to the Funded Now What podcast with your host, Andrew Lee Miller, brought to you by GrowthExpertz. You're in store for a chat about funding, marketing, startups, and all things growth.
All right, everybody. Hello, and welcome back to the Funded Now What podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lee Miller, also known as Andrew Startups. And today I've got Aurimas, who's the founder and CEO of Dextall. Dextall is a prefab construction technology company that does very interesting things for large scale buildings, as opposed to some other people that have been on the show that are doing residential stuff. This is residential, but at a scale much larger than most other prefab companies could ever dream of. They've got a software component. They're like building stuff in Europe and shipping it to projects in the US. And so I reached out and I thought it was really cool. So Aurimas, thank you so much for being here.
Awesome, Andrew. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to share the story.
Absolutely. First Lithuanian founder on the show, by the way. So shout out to that. He's in Lithuania right now, but I think when I reached out, he was in New York back in the day. But so you raised like what, almost $20 million, I think, by now for this company.
So, yeah.
First, I guess, give me a little bit better intro. I purposefully don't do a ton of research because I'd rather everybody hear it from your mouth on what the company is and why you started it. And then I want to hear more about raising that much money and what you learned through that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Andrew. Look, I'm not an engineer. I'm not an architect. Somehow magically I got into construction world 20 plus years ago. And sort of, it's like a mafia. Like, it sucks you in and it never allows you to leave. But I would say my first real success in the industry was over probably 18 years ago. I co-founded and I ran a commercial window company, more traditional window company. We ended up, building commercial windows and selling to mid and high rise building market. And gradually and organically, really, we didn't have any outside capital. We didn't have outside loans. So we sort of figured out, bootstrap this business to a nationwide company, what it is today. Throughout this process, look, when you run a business, you live and breathe the business, and you really understand what are the issues, what are the nuances, and you sort of naturally start seeing the opportunities of where the industry is heading and what we ultimately need to fix. Like, what are the fundamental things we need to fix? So I visited a number of job sites, and when I speak about the job sites, there could be, buildings anywhere from 10 to 25, 30 story buildings. And you start seeing sort of the same patterns, right? It's a lot of people, quite messy, right? And how they, we make a perfect product in a factory, and then the product gets to the site and God knows what happens to it, right? And so that was, for me, that was the sort of the one side of the story. It's the physical product. It's something that you feel, touch, you can wrap your mind around. But there was another part of the story that nobody ever talked about. And so for this, I'll give you a very quick, story where I had a light bulb moment. And when people say you had a light bulb moment, I always think it's kind of complete BS. Like, it never happens. But for me, it honestly, this was one in a lifetime, and it actually happened. So
Nice.
In 2018, I was part of the window company. We were working on a large scale project in Washington, DC. And then the salesperson invited me to a meeting. And right around the table, we have architects, developers, general contractors, consultants. It's about 12 people around the table. And that was, mind you, that was pre-COVID, right?
Yeah.
So for 2 hours, I'm sitting and observing the whole thing. For 2 hours, all they were talking about is how to install a window. They had this like a mock wall corner sample and then a mock window corner sample. And then we kept moving this thing back and forth. And I said, Jesus Christ, can we do something better with our time? I mean, like so many people coming to the meeting, going back to the office, just wasting half of the day. And then I go back to the office and my chief drafter tells me that this was the 11th iteration of the installation detail. And it just sort of blew my mind, right? And I said, man, we pay so much attention to what how the physical product looks like, but we take it for granted that we take it as status quo of how the design and coordination process works. So what ultimately happened, it dawned on me that architects and designers live in their own silo. They create cool stuff, they create projects, they create designs, they create beautiful renderings. Yet somebody has to go and execute. And the people who have to execute, whether it's a factory, whether it's an on-site construction, they kind of don't really talk to them, right? Like, and they don't communicate along the way. And so you create this sort of manual back and forth process that requires intense amount of resources. It requires insane amount of coordination and really time. Time is the money in this business.
Of course.
Right. And so for me, that was like two aspects. And when I said, like, let me start Dextall, which was basically, it's not just making a prefab panel that consists of window insulation and everything else, which is ultimately like a Lego block that we deliver to the job site. But it's also, let us start thinking about creating a software that can ultimately bridge the gap between design and the execution. So that's sort of inception of Dextall, which started 6 years ago. And thankfully we've been fairly successful in industry standard. We had a lot of projects delivered. We have a lot of new projects coming up. We have a lot of factories, making products and so forth. So we really, what I would say, what Dextall was successful of doing is we institutionalized and we de-risked the prefab business in a bit on high-rise buildings, right? Which before was sort of littered with various failures for one reason or the other. Dextall focused very strictly on one part of the building, and we ultimately were able to execute what needed to be executed.
Nice. I love that. You start a business for one reason, and then you find a totally other business inside of it, becoming an expert. And anytime you see 11 2-hour meetings for one tiny part of the building, there's probably room for optimization there. So what does that look like with your product then? That 11 iterations of a 2-hour meeting goes down to, we just buy this window, it plugs in, you don't have to think about the installation, or what?
Yeah. So look, we're still sort of working towards the ideal project scenario. I think we're halfway through. There's still a lot to improve, but now what we were able to do is we were able to create a software that if you design a building using Dextall software, you can take that automation from design all the way to execution. Along the way, you automate the, architectural drawings, fabrication drawings, you name it. That process alone, for call it the 25-story building, is about 10,000 engineering hours on any facade company. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine, like, 10,000? Like, it's 5 full-time engineers working the entire year just creating drawings. We have that process fully automated, right? What was interesting last year, we have created this process, and then we went out to the architectural world and we said, use this. This is a perfect tool. And the architects, and one architect in particular, he looked at this whole process and he said, man, oh man, you guys have created unbelievable software for fabricators, not for architects. And I said, well, what do you exactly mean? He said, we want to be in control of the design. So like, what we had to understand, that it was another piece of the puzzle that we have to solve, is that the architects still want to create a unique building.
Right.
They don't want to create just the boxes. So we stepped back and we said, okay, let's use this software internally. Like Dextall is the only company in the world actually that can do this. Go from design all the way to fabrication drawings in an instance. Like that does not exist in our industry. We have some genius software engineers who were able to create, codes in the software even before AI came along. But we never really figured out how to properly capture the architect. And so last year we started working on this new concept, Cora. Cora is the software that ultimately plugs in directly into architects' workflow. They don't leave their desk. They don't leave the window that they work on. Cora, what it does, it automates and it speeds up their design process anywhere from 10 to 15 times, which is incredible. Like what normally would have taken them month, 2 months, they can basically do that in one day. And instead of using a avid Revit user, the junior staff can do the work. So
Wow.
we automated this whole thing, but the most intricate part of this whole thing is that we can then take that data and then bring it to our internal processes and still automate this entire workflow. So
That's a huge value add.
that's
for
what
sure.
Dextall was able to do. And not only provide the benefit to architect designing it faster, create a buildable design, understand how this building can be executed. Because what happens in today's world, architect creates look, there's a bunch of cool softwares out there, and I'll do it. The start of saying that we're the coolest software. There's a lot of cool softwares out there, right? Like especially using AI, you can generate renderings, you can generate
Of course.
unique shapes of the building, optimize spaces, and so forth. You know what the trick is? You still need to go out and build it,
Right.
right? Like
There's a
so the
gap
general
between.
it needs to figure out, where do I procure the materials? How much do they cost? Can I actually get them? Okay, when I figure out all these components and I'm like, how do they come together? Like we need to test this, right? Every project goes through this. So what's unique in Cora and then connection to Dextall is that if it starts in Cora, it's a
Finish it.
buildable design. You don't need to think about can someone execute this or not. You can understand the cost immediately. You can understand this the sort of the details of it, the technicality of it immediately, and know that whatever you designed, someone can do this accurately. And we have a number of projects where we've done renderings and we've done projects in our softwares, and then you build the building and they look identical, or the buildings sometimes look even better than the renderings, right? So we have a number of these examples, which really in our industry, we don't see it because architect creates a cool design. By the time it gets built, it's a
Not the
complete
same.
watered out version.
Yeah,
of
because it has to be feasible. The architect is the artist, and then the builders are the people that are actually on earth with what's realistic.
Yeah.
So just trying to understand the business. So Cora is the wedge then that people start by using the software. So you're more focused on like marketing and selling the software, or is it totally two separate things? Because on the website, it's a drop down, it's like products and then software. But the ideal situation is someone comes in with the software, they build it, and then they just buy everything for it, like window wise from you after using it to design, right?
Yeah. So it's a great comment, by the way. And I've been, look, we raise capital, so I had to have a lot of these conversations with investors and so forth.
Of course.
And they're like, so what are you? You're the hardware, you're the software company. We don't really understand who you are, right? Like we can't put you in a bucket, right? And so that's
good
probably
sometimes, but not for investors. Yeah.
If we were to expand the conversation of the capital raise, and that's the unique part about Dextall, is because Dextall is ultimately solving an issue. And solving an issue required us to be both in a way and create this ecosystem, right? So software could not be born without the hardware. So we had to build the actual product, right? We had to de-risk the product in the marketplace and standardize it enough so that we can actually build the software out of it. So we then build the software, and now we had to sell enough product manually, go out to the market, knock on architect's door, sell the product, have people come to our job sites, touch it and feel it and say, oh my God, this is so simple. Like why nobody has ever done it before. Right. And so like all these things, then we were able to wrap sort of the bow around it and say, we can now standardize this in a digital world. And then we can start bringing this to the software. And to your point, you're right. Like the next step really now is we're starting to push Cora into the world of the architecture and design world so that they actually can use it. And instead of just manually getting the work by knocking the architect's door and doing presentations, now the architects actually can start using us in a digital world. And then we're gonna through being that wedge, the software being that wedge, we can start pulling that demand out of the software and to really start executing on it. So again, it had to be very intentional, right? Like you can't just come out and say, we're gonna do it all, we're gonna do software. It just doesn't work like that. Right?
No
Like
one will
if
trust
you
you.
just
Yeah.
do the software, you're just gonna be another software, right? Like the software has, like our software is built on 6 years in engineering and 6 years of manufacturing data. And so people are
Nobody
asking,
has
can
that.
AI disrupt you? Not that
No.
hard. Like, you can't disrupt the data records, right? Like this is a unique thing that we were able to create. And so we
Of
can
course.
automate further using AI, and we use a lot of it now. But fundamentally we have so much data that we've built this thing on.
I got it. But can't someone who's using a different product still use the design software? Like I mentioned to you before we started recording that, where I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's a lot of prefab buildings that don't look like there was any thought put into the design. They're just like, let's try and make as many units as possible, as fast as possible, optimize for revenue. And from what I saw from the website, I was like, oh, cool. It helps with the design and of these buildings, which then leads to a happier community, I think, down the line when buildings look unique and interesting. So couldn't someone just come in to be a software client only?
Yeah. So you're sort of pulling some of the answers from me that I share this usually when we talk about like this, the future vision of Dextall, like
Yeah.
real future. Think about, and I'll give you a little comparison to Amazon. Not that we're comparing ourselves to Amazon, but
Hey,
I think there's a very great analogy here. In 1997, when Amazon was selling books, what ultimately they did is they didn't just sell the book. They were really de-risking the online purchase. People didn't want to put their cars and, the card numbers in on the internet. So there was sort of, the risk that it had to be mitigated. What Dextall did is Dextall de-risked the prefab concept. And so we were able to really successfully de-risk that part of the business. Now, the second part is Amazon thought about their consumer, that consumer not only can buy, a book, they can buy a t-shirt, they can buy a bicycle, they can buy a lot of things. For Dextall, that consumer is the architect. And to your point, is the architect can design the building that fits for Dextall, but the reality, if we give them the right tool, they can start designing a lot of other buildings, right? They can design buildings that, look more like a concrete precast walls. They can design buildings that look more like glass curtain walls that are not necessarily perfect fit for Dextall, and on and on and on. And so then this sort of resembles what Amazon was doing. Like they pulled so much demand from the consumer that they no longer were able to satisfy themselves. Right. And so the vision of Dextall is that Dextall can only probably support 30% of what Cora creates
exactly.
the demand. And 70% we will be able to bring other participants to this platform
Bingo.
where they can actually start executing the work, and Dextall can start sharing the digital knowledge and technologies that we've created to automate our internal process. Because if it takes 10,000 engineering hours for Dextall, like assuming no technology in place, to do the drawing sets along this process, well, it's the same story for everybody else, right? But if we can empower them to automate their processes, then all of a sudden we're creating this real ecosystem that connects the design and true prefabrication. So when the architect designs a building in San Francisco, they can design it and they say, there's 5 manufacturers in your area that can execute precisely for the certain price point, so to stay in a budget, right? That's where we're going. But but you can't
Makes
get
sense.
there. You can't get there starting this whole marketplace or prefab or platform immediately. You have to be very intentional. You have to start with the hardware, right? You have to de-risk the business. Then you have to create a demand. And then when you have a
Yeah.
lot of demand, then you can start figuring out how to,
Yeah,
to
I
ultimately
mean,
demand.
oftentimes when one of my biggest successes in my career was a two-sided marketplace, and I've since consulted on many. And when it comes to the supply side, people can be very understanding. Hey, we're going to bring you some free business because people are using our design software, but it's going to be a little bit slow, and they'll be on the platform for as long. They don't need value right away. You're giving them free clients, those manufacturers. So I think that but it makes sense. I mean, if you catch someone at design phase, you can own them through the whole process. I mean, you create a ton of value, so it's not like owning them. You don't have to convince them anything. But I mean, it seems like the vision eventually is de-risk it, make it 10 times faster or 100 or whatever number you said, but then also take the guesswork out of finding the right person for each thing from finishes to foundation or whatever, because you have this pre-vetted marketplace. And I mean,
And mainly,
I
and
think it's
look, I think one other sort of trap that most companies and especially startups fall into in our space is the construction world is so big, right? Is just enormous. If you just look at exterior wall market in the United States alone, it's a $75 billion annual industry, right? Like it's massive. So you don't have to like, and I use this terminology a lot of times. Some of the companies that came in, they were trying to do is boil the ocean. You don't have to boil the ocean. Figure out how the facade works. You just solve 15% of entire industry problem, and it's a huge deal, right? Like, see, it's a hundreds of billions of dollars of issues that you just solve right there. Then take another step, right? Like you don't have to do it all at once. And I think that's sort of the lesson that we have to repeat ourselves all the time. It's
yeah,
just there's a lot of shiny objects when
of
you scale the
course.
business, but you have to be like diligent and stay true to what you can do best.
Man, I couldn't say that better. I would say 50% of the reason that I've had any clients fail over the last 5 years has been shiny object syndrome. You come in as an expert in one thing, and then you're like, "Oh, there's a problem. Oh, there's a problem," but you have
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
able to strategize. And honestly, I wish everybody could think about like that. Like, if you can solve 15% of the problem, that's enough value for people to work with you. Then you create a brand that people trust, and then you have them in your ecosystem, and then you can be the person that solves every problem. And so I call it the wedge. Somebody else named it, but there's usually one feature or one product that people love enough to convert pretty highly, and you run with that for a while, and then from there you can do the things that they didn't even know there would ever be a solution for, but they're already in your world. You have absolutely unfettered access to them once they become a customer. So it makes sense for this why you raise so much money. I mean, you mentioned before we started recording that you're literally like an international operation making these windows and stuff. And but if the software is the wedge and then they come in just for the windows, who is the customer? Like, is it private equity companies, large scale developers? Like, narrow it down for me. Who are the people buying the start? I guess Cora.
So Andrew, I just gonna, if you don't mind, I
Please,
think words matter, and I just want to correct you if you don't mind.
please.
Not a window. Like we make
Sorry,
the entire wall. So
the
what I
wall.
just want the wall. So the buildings that we start off, they're naked. You just have floors. When our product goes onto the building is finished, right? So
Nice.
so it has a cladding, it has an insulation layer, it has a window, it has everything. So it's literally and it's connected with the sort of rubber gaskets. And so when the panel to panel connection happens, you don't need to go outside. You don't need cranes, you don't need anything. So it's very fast. And it's like the best analogy is I have is the Lego block, right? Like imagine these bulk Lego blocks come to the job site and then boom, boom, you add one on top of the other and you're done. Okay. So I think
Amazing.
that's where we thrive is we bring something that is very easy to comprehend, but it's so unique at the same time. So answering your question, sorry, I deviated here for a
No.
second.
That makes sense, by the way. And I'm sorry I misspoke. I think,
Yeah.
words matter, but imagery matters just as much. And when you go to the website, you mostly only see window pieces. And that could be
Yeah.
where that came from, and a lot of
Yeah. And
people, there's,
yeah, and our product look consists of a lot of things. It's a window, it's a cladding, it's so what we're trying to give an imagery to our viewers is that we do a complete facade, right? Like, we do a complete building, and that consists of everything. But in terms of the clients, I would say there's, in our business, there's three major stakeholders: architect, developer, and general contractor. Usually private equity firms or funds don't go down to sort of construction or building level, like they will just
yeah,
deploy capital. General contractors mainly follow what has been decided on the design part of it. So I would say if I were to break it down, our focus is maybe 10-15% general contractors, because they still need to understand exactly what we're building and how we're building it and how we're going to be delivering, and that we're not putting their project at risk. But then real focus is on architects and developers. And as we're
makes sense.
growing, I believe that as most of the developers are seeing that, what developers care really about is, can you deliver the
Time and
price that
money.
you told me
Yeah,
you get? Yeah. Can you hit the budget? And can you make sure you execute correctly, so I don't risk anything, right? Like, those are, I would say, and the third one, if they're keeping the building, they want to ensure that there's a quality and longevity aspect to it, right? If you hit those three, they really don't care about much anymore, right? Architects, though, they care about a lot of details, the design and other things. So as we're growing, as we do more and more projects, it's very easy at that point for us to make sure that the clients understand, look, we've delivered to the price that we said we will deliver. The quality you can go check, and we kind of test these products on over and over again. And so the quality assurance is there. And the last part is that, we have enough track record on execution, so developers are more comfortable. As we're scaling, especially with Cora and the digital sort of platforms, we believe the architect is going to be, the key unlockers, right, of
of course.
the flow of demand. So
Yeah.
maybe now it's 50-50 architect developer. Maybe architects are going to shift towards larger percentage, as we're scaling and as we're growing.
Makes sense. I mean, to be a good architect, in an age of AI, the hardest pieces of the puzzle, like the facade and optimizing things that take 11 2-hour meetings, are where I think you create your value as an architect. How are you getting customers then? I mean, with such a large innovation, are customers coming to you, or are you doing any marketing? How are you growing the business?
All of the above, right? It's the in a growing organizations to do everything. But I believe we have pretty defined process of how we find customers, right? So we have Salesforce, our business development department. We have individuals who go out and do presentations to developers, general contractors. We do a lot of presentations to architects. Obviously, we're pretty, vocal on social media, LinkedIn, website, you name it. Like, those are I'm talking to you, right? Like, there's a lot of the
Yeah,
things that I think you do to supplement the fundamental work. But I think the third leg, besides the physical outreach and all the social media and the other marketing efforts, is going to be the digital world, right? Like,
mhm,
if we get Cora, and this is now we're starting to build a Salesforce for software part. If Cora, and when really Cora takes off, that should really become a major pull of demand for future work that we have.
I agree. Yeah, and the earlier you can catch someone on their project, the less sales effort it takes, because they haven't made any
100%.
purchasing decisions. They haven't gone down that line, and you can really convince them on the value of, like you mentioned, from start to finish. So that is definitely makes sense. Well, let's dive into the digital stuff they're doing. I mean, there's two types of marketing. There's inbound and outbound. And a lot of people when they tell me that they're, a sales-led organization, they're really only focusing on the outbound stuff, which is, LinkedIn outreach, email outreach. But for developers and architects, and in the age of AI, in almost any B2B scenario, there's another fourth leg, which is the event space now. And we're seeing small cocktail dinners all the way up to getting you to speak at conferences is a major kind of AI proof way to really grow the business. And for something that honestly, we spoke for 30 minutes of our 50-minute podcast just about how cool the company is and how unique it is. When you have so much value for the industry and you're leading innovation in such a large leap forwards, it should be a no-brainer to get you speaking gigs at conferences. So I just touched 10 things, but do you feel like those areas the company is handling that, or do you want me to dive in deeper on any of that stuff?
I mean, we're happy to dive deeper, but at the same time, it's an interesting conversation, and we used to have a lot of internal conversations. Really, what is our approach, right? Because what we're selling, it's a pretty expensive thing, right? Like
Right.
we're not selling that costs $100,000. We're selling something that costs few million, or
Yeah.
potentially tens of millions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
So people don't really make these decisions just by receiving or sending an email, right?
Of course.
It's less of a transactional thing, it's more of a relationship based thing. And
Mhm.
so we had a lot of internal discussions is how do you scale relationship based business? Right. And so as a company, we have a lot of sort of buckets of what does that mean? Right. And so we do a lot of initiatives, podcasts, conferences, we have, the reason I'm in Lithuania, because we have a bunch of potential and existing clients coming and experiencing of what we're showing them the ideal project scope or ideal project process. We show
Mhm.
them, we introduce them and, obviously we're bringing them to, and showing how Dextall factories work and everything else. And then we sharing our internal processes. But beyond that, our goal is to give a glimpse to these architects or these developers is that the business, the way you do it today, can actually take some improvement, right?
Mhm.
And what we're telling them is don't take it all, but we want you to understand what does it mean to have a perfect project. Let's just take facades. Let's just take that 15% of your project, but we'll show you how do you do this ideally and how do you save money, have a better quality product, faster deliveries, on and on and on, right? So again, I'm sort of, you know, winded way to answer your quick question, but there's multiple initiatives, right? It's not
Love
just
that.
a one thing. And then we have to be very intentional of how we think about it because, you know, software solves portion of it. Software doesn't solve everything, right? Again, it's like a lot of companies coming into our industry from, especially from Silicon Valley, where, you might have created an awesome startup that created one gadget or a software in general.
Mhm.
And it sounds like you can rule the world. All of a sudden you come into construction world and you start realizing that it's pretty old school, right?
Definitely.
The risk category matters a lot. There's millions of nuances. If you want to sell a very expensive product, it just doesn't work like you would sell for
Of course.
enterprise software. Like there's a lot of these things that you have to account for. So Dextall is very sort of intentional, thinking about every single component. And because we have people that came from the industry, we try to see what are the blind spots that we can potentially avoid from the get-go.
All of that makes sense. I think if I was your CMO though, intentional often means slow. And I want to flip it to a question. What percentage of your customer base do you think knows that this technology exists right now?
When you say so, that's another complex question, right? Because when you say customer, it could be general contract, it could be architect, it could be developer. I would say if you take
All the ICP, I think you mentioned like 3 different ICPs, but we're really, like the end goal is to get to the architect. Maybe that takes
I would
longer,
say I would
but
say 20-30%.
So then we need more marketing. You know, if you are 100x leap in advancement, even if it's only for 15% of the total project, we need 100% of the people to know about this exists. You know, when a company works with me, that's what stresses me out. That's what motivates me to work 18 hours a day. I agree with being intentional. We don't think that we're going to get a customer from one LinkedIn message. It's not about that. It's outreach is ground cover. It just always happens. The sales team needs to be overloaded with meetings and demos. I agree that people need to see the product. It's one thing to be like, I sent you a case study of how we finished a building 6 months faster and under budget. It's another thing to like watch a video or see it in person clicking in place and be like, holy shit, this thing really works. And that guy designed it on his own computer with his software. So I know that there's all those components. And I mean, I wouldn't have a career if I didn't work with the people who told me our old school industries totally different, Andrew. You don't understand. It's the same playbook. At the end of the day, we need you speaking at conferences because you're the only one innovating in this old school space. You know, you want to get on targeted podcasts. This one's not super targeted, but I appreciate you coming on anyway. It's really cool. But, you know, but the inbound that I was talking about at the beginning is one of the most interesting things. Like all of these old school people, all of these developers, everybody except for the people deploying the capital are talking to AI and they're like, what are ways that I can decrease or increase the efficiencies of our project? What is the market? What's the most cutting edge things that we can add to this building? I want my new project to be like what unbelievably cutting edge. And then, oh, it looks like Dextall does this and that. So you have to create all that content and put it out there on your own. And that's actually a new, relatively new marketing strategy called GEO. Very few businesses are doing it. And and this is only the second podcast I think I've talked about. As of last week, we've now have Chat GPT ads as well, which are relatively new. I mean, I don't know how many thousand people have access to it, but we're in that pool. And we have contextual targeting. So if an architect or developer is talking to their AI over the course of thinking about this next project, whether they're looking for the plot of land or whatever, and now you have the ability to target them based on the context of all those private decisions. And so the AI search marketing is unbelievably powerful because you want to hit people with Quora before they go down any other rabbit hole. And now we're able to do that through AI. At the same time, the outreach is a numbers game. It pisses off a lot of people. I've already figured out what software, fuck off. You say that, but I would say 10 to 15% of people are like, yeah, I haven't decided blank, blank, blank thing yet. Thanks so much for reaching out. Or when we get there, we'll talk. I'll make sure I bring this up with my team. And then they accept your connection on LinkedIn, and you start to build this network of all the decision makers that are going to have 10, 20 projects more over the course of their career. And then that content comes into play. And so I'm just ranting for a little bit, but I see, no offense, and with all due respect, an opportunity when a founder is like, I need to be more intentional and slow down. Like, that's all great. And the marketer should be the devil on the shoulder, whereas the founder is the brand protector angel on the shoulder. That's like, hey, let's rein Andrew in a little bit, you know? But I think there's some good things that we can do there. And there's always a happy medium between the two of us. And I think that sales led is great, but those sales cycles tend to be long, sorry. And if you hit people inbound, they read a Construction Weekly article about how a project finished under budget and 12 months faster from using Dextall. They're going to come to you like, take my money. And that sales cycle is about 5 times shorter usually. And so that, not to toot my own horn, but I do think marketing will have a lot of value, and you've raised enough money, and very few people come on the show and say there's 100x innovation in their product. And that's when we need to be screaming from the rooftops. Does that make sense?
100%.
Sweet.
And sometimes I really appreciate your comments. And I think sometimes, we have to, as an organization, sometimes we have to get outside our skin and say, look, we have to scream from rooftops, right? Like, and actually at the end of the day, we're running an engineering company, right? And a lot of engineers, they tend to be, sort of, until the product is perfect, they don't want to scream off the top of the rooftop, right?
That's my entire career, is that I'm the mouthpiece.
Even if the product is perfect, they will just say it to the next person, right? Like, they're not going to scream it out.
Yeah.
So
No, that's right. And that's why they hire me 100%. That's the value prop in having a marketer, because you feel uncomfortable, but you have the data to back it up. And there's no such thing as targeted spam. If there are people out there that are doing the 11 2-hour meetings to do something that you automate, you're just trying to help them. We're just trying to save them time. And so that's what gives us the confidence to be really aggressive. I'm not trying to convince someone to buy a used car that I just like stuck some sawdust in the engine so it runs only 100 kilometers and then it breaks. We're not selling anything unethical. We are trying to actually, at the end goal, get people into their homes faster. That is, when I look at Dextall, that's the thing that pulls on my heartstrings. I live in a place where there are thousands of unhoused people and there's not affordable housing because the cost and time it takes to build housing, it doesn't make ROI for in the place that it is. So if companies like Dextall become the norm, then more people get access to housing. I mean, that's the end goal, I think. And so if you're saving the developer money, they can pass that down to the end customer. And then all of a sudden you're solving some really big problems. And so I think that's what should motivate the team to scream from the rooftops is we're actually trying to help these projects. Because if a developer can finish 4 more projects in a year, they can really reduce the cost to the end consumer. And then all of a sudden you've solved a thing that costs taxpayers in California hundreds of millions of dollars a year. That just goes to like administration and salaries, and doesn't solve anything. So that's what I saw when I looked at Dextall's site. I mean, I made the mistake on the window, but I got the mission
no,
right.
you're spot on. It's like any business, right? Like as you're growing in a growth organization, you're always dealing with limited resources. So you're trying to really be smart about how far your dollar can go, right? Like
Right.
I always have that thought, like, what do I need to do to make sure my dollar goes further than any other companies, right? And so
Love
sometimes
that.
you make the decisions that may be different from other organizations, but
Of course.
the track record for Dextall showed that ultimately we were pretty successful deploying capital in getting to the stage that we're in such a short
I'd
period
say
of
so.
time. That was a sort of very unique company in our space, compared to any other companies who've raised hundreds and billions of dollars. They
Right.
never were able to get to the traction where Dextall is today.
That's
So,
amazing.
but now I agree with you. What does that next step really look for Dextall? And how do we think about institutionalizing our approach as we've sort of built that foundation, as we've built that almost like a
Growth
baseline,
engine.
like,
Yeah.
as I've talked about de-risking the category. Okay, we've sort of de-risked the category. Okay, now we need to really go out there and say, okay, that is done. Let's really make sure that the entire industry can be redefined of what we're building and how we're building, because we know that's the way to do it. And that's the only way to do it if we want to have better buildings, if we want to have less expensive and on budget buildings. Like a lot of all these things ultimately has to happen. And Dextall and type of Dextall solution is the only way to get there.
Absolutely. Well, I love the way you talk as a founder for sure. It's definitely not your first company, like you mentioned. You can really see that. But well, let me answer some of those question marks. I think that's the best way to create value for you. Last question I think I have before I get into just ranting about creating that list for your team and what you need to do is, do you feel like the sales team's pipeline is full, or do you actually want to increase the top of the funnel? Like, do you want more clients? Do you want more projects? Or is like
I think
Cora
we have
maxed
like
out?
it's an interesting problem that we're solving, right? Like with the top of the funnel is pretty dense.
Yeah,
What we need to do and what we are working on now is like, how do we convert? Like how we create an interest, but now there's so many nuances in the process that we want to make sure we convert these projects into actual prefab rather than on-site construction. And so you get involved in a lot of these discussions, but yeah, that's probably,
yeah.
at the end of you still need to create that, you still need to always be focused on the top of the funnel, right? Like that's where the density has to
Absolutely.
be. at any given time, regardless.
Yeah, and I would drill into what that density is made out of, because I think timing is a really big thing for a Dextall customer. You're trying to hit them with the software first, so they need to be in a certain phase of pre-design or something, to where they really are have not locked into other decisions. And so just because it's dense with leads and people that are interested, there's probably a timing signal. A lot of B2B outreach and B2B marketing and sales, you're looking for a signal. And the best CROs, they figure out what that signal is, and then that's what so it's not just a flat ICP. There's a specific signal at the ICP that makes them ready to move forwards. And so now we have AI. I'm sure you've had dozens of customers so far. If you try to plot every single thing that was going on for that business when they move forward, you might be able to find what that signal is. And what I'm just spitballing an example might be is, like I said, they have decided on the location of the project, they've decided on the budget, but they haven't started any of the design. So that's a stupid example. I don't know all the details, but there's probably like 20 or 30 factors that go into the decision. Is their timing right to use a software for design? And because it seems to me it's a no-brainer decision on prefab versus on site, like the time and cost savings. But if they've already gone down a certain cost in that other direction, they'll be like, yeah, this is cool, this is a nice to have for the next project. I always tell B2B CEOs that there's like 3 buckets that your product falls into as far as like mindset of the customer. And I've never seen anybody else say this, so it could be bullshit, but it feels right to me to say it. But it's, I don't need this. This is not right for us. This is really cool, but I don't have to have this. And I fucking have to have this right now. And you should be I need to have this right now because I want to save $10 million in 11 hours, 2-hour meetings or whatever. But there's a timing aspect to that. Like what ends up happening is a lot of people fall into that middle bucket. This is really cool, but I already spent $1 million on designs, or I already committed to doing on-site construction. So I think that probably in that density of all the leads they have, there's a bunch of people that the timing isn't right, or there's some other factor that you can analyze by looking at all the leads, all the companies that have moved forwards, all the happy finished projects, and you can figure out what that I component is. And that might be the crazy thing that helps you drill down more, because once they figure out the timing, then I can figure out what are these people doing on the internet at the time that they have this timing, or what are they talking about on social media? What are they searching on Google or with AI? And then we can really target them at the right time. Without that information, like you said, you need a massive amount of top of the funnel outreach and PR and going to conferences and speaking and doing podcasts so that they see you when they're having the conversation in office about, hey, should we do prefab or should we do on-site? Oftentimes you can't be in that meeting, but if one employee who's in that meeting got connected with you on LinkedIn 6 months prior and saw you posting every day about the problems that you're solving, they just want to be smart in that meeting. And they'll be like, hey, actually, I've been working with this company or talking to this company. Then you just want them to look smart to everyone else they're working with. And that's what we provide by keeping your network massive and connected with all those people. Is whenever the timing happens, they'll be like, oh yeah, I know a guy, I saw this cool thing, and then all of a sudden you're in there with a shorter sales cycle. Does that make sense?
Totally. No, totally. And as I mentioned to you, look, we've started somewhere. We had to be intentional, build certain momentum, build a foundation. Now is the time that we're looking into the future and kind of finding the new tools, new ways, and new approaches to really scale this beyond of where we are today. Start screaming from.
Yeah, I mean, you should. You're one of the most innovative companies I've had on the show. Like, I think that like only maybe 5 out of 50 podcast guests have been in such an old school industry, and nobody's had 100x improvement with the first thing. And software plus hardware is such a hard thing to get right, and so it's super impressive. And yeah, I think just to round out the conversation, so you know what to really talk to your team about. It's about the whole inbound and outbound. So screaming from the rooftops in 2026 means founder-led LinkedIn. So you should have someone on your team that's that's maybe sits 1 hour per month with you. You just rant to them. They have AI record it all. And then the AI takes that transcript and makes it into 20, 30 LinkedIn posts for you about this is, sometimes I'll tell CEOs to just take notes after every meeting that you do. Take a few notes on what you realized lit up their eyes after they talk to you. It could be with prospects, with current clients, with the media, whatever. But then you have prompts to talk to that employee for 1 hour per month on recording. So founder-led LinkedIn content is pretty important because we're also doing outreach, automated outreach. There's a bunch of different software that just consistently add developers, add VCs for the next fundraising round, add architects as well. Every potential person that you want to know what you're doing from the rooftop, but they don't really move forwards, as you mentioned, from one connection request on LinkedIn. They might accept, but it's really that content that they see organically over time that really plants a seed in their mind so that when that meeting happens, they go, oh, you should talk to this company, Dextall. I've been talking to them. They lie like that. That's really what happens. I've been talking to them for years, but in reality, they just saw it on social media. They don't remember where. So that's one really important piece. Also, I don't say it very much, but when you have such a defined and target ICP or a few different ICPs, you can run very cheap ads on LinkedIn targeting those specific businesses. So if you have some like dream customers that it's going to take forever to close, you can actually pick the name of the company and the roles in the company. We're only going to show our case studies. This project finished 12 months early or blank, blank, blank under budget. And you can show those case studies. Now that I mention it, you'll see it. People are doing it to you also. But usually it's the $100 million raised company and they're just blanketing LinkedIn with ads. But if you go in and specifically suggest, the name of the company, €1,000 a month, and you'll become quite a famous brand name in the industry and get really well known because they just see your ads. You can also frequency cap so it doesn't get annoying. So LinkedIn is a big piece. The AI search GEO is a really big piece because the bigger the org, the bigger the project, the more higher the cost of the product you're selling, the more they're going to talk to AI about it. I'll never forget 2 years ago, I had a client that got a multi-million-dollar client from a 30-minute call because the client had just asked ChatGPT, what's the best vendor for this thing that we need? And we're getting a little bit savvier. Like you should back up and actually come to the factory in Lithuania and see the product and everything. But if it's recommended by AI, you're old enough like me to remember when Google was relatively new. And if it comes up at the top of Google, you just trust it, Now we're smart to know that you can hack that and gamify it. That's part of what I do, but AI is similar. It's harder to fake that. You need a lot of credible connections to your business for many years to rank high in AI. So you can't just do it in a week. And so that's actually really important because, like you mentioned, it's relationship based. The outreach starts to build the relationship. It takes time. But if there's an immediate need on a project, which probably happens, then they're going to go to AI to find that. And so you want to show up for that. So those are the two biggest trends. And then there's a lot of drop down micro tasks underneath all those things. Like PR gets you those links to other websites that validates you for AI, but it also, there's 20, 30 really powerful industry specific niche media sites where developers might crack open a magazine of developer. I just call it whatever, ICP Weekly, Developer Weekly magazine or online. And you have such a powerful, interesting story. Starting with the 20 years in the Windows space yourself, I think it's not like it's some software guy that's just trying to inject into the space. So you seem like a very earned media free like you should not have to pay to get into those, to talk about the future, to talk about what helps separate an architect from AI these days, and what separates an architect is actually the connection to the final product and blah, 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 blah. And so PR should be something that you should be full-time invested in, whether it's a human or an agency, because it's only like a one-year investment, and then you're dominating your whole space, and then they're just coming to you. You just really got to get that 20% that you mentioned to like 70, 80%, because then it becomes word of mouth for the last 30. And yeah, I think it's doable because you're so innovative. So it's not like, I'll have companies reach out to me that are like cell phone case startups, and I'm like, I can't get you global recognition for this, but for what you're working on, any solid marketer should be foaming at the mouth for an opportunity to market 100x innovation in an old school industry. It's like a dream scenario as a marketer. So just go out and find those marketers.
Will do. Awesome.
Awesome.
Andrew, thank you for your time and having this conversation and listening to what we have to offer.
Hey, thank you for your time, and thank you for everything that you guys do to eventually make housing more affordable. It's a pain we feel in California very much. So appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you, Aurimas.
Thank you.
That has been another episode of the Funded Now What podcast with your host, Andrew Lee Miller, brought to you by GrowthExpertz. If you liked this episode, please subscribe. And if you really liked it, please share with other founders and entrepreneurs. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next episode.